Good morning, friends.
Good morning. This morning, Susan will be presenting first, and then I will be.
Okay. Wasn't sure if it was Laura or Susan or thank you. I'm using my stand-up desk. That means there's two Zappos boxes. All right, well, I am seeing a pretty full house, and we've got stuff to cover here today. So I'm going to get us rolling here at 10:01 and call the meeting of the St. Paul City Council Budget Committee to order. We are wrapping up our portion of the budget process here over the next 7 days, I guess. And this morning we have a presentation quickly from Susan Earle that will cover the final adjustments to the 2020 budget. And following that, we'll get a summary update from Holly about the council process in the 2021 budget, where we are with our priorities heading into this evening's Truth in Taxation hearing. We do have 8 people registered to speak at the hearing. Many people have chosen to use our phone-in method or our email method to share their thoughts on this year's budget as well. So those methods are all viable options, but we do have 8 people who will be speaking tonight to us at 6 p.m. So with that, I think what we'll do is get the update from Susan, take questions as we go through that. We get an update from Holly, again, take questions as we go through that, answer any outstanding questions, and tee ourselves up for a good Truth and Taxation hearing tonight and as we head into our final vote on the budget, ideally next Wednesday. So I think that covers the basis, Holly, is that correct? Yep. Okay. All right, then we will get started here. Did you have something to add?
No. Council President Brendmoen, that will take care of it.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, then let's move on to Susan Earle. Big day for Susan Earle, perhaps your last budget presentation to the council. We thank you for your work here on this budget and that you've stuck with us till the bitter end to get this done before you left us in the dust. So, welcome.
Thank you, Council President Brendmoen. I don't know if this is my last. You'll probably hear from me a few more times before the budget's wrapped up, but we're definitely getting there. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. What I've got for you all today, there we go, is what we call our technical adjustments tracker. And so this is really the foundation of the attachment that will go to adopt the budget. And so what's not on here yet is what y'all will be discussing after I finish this, your changes to the more policy-driven changes that you all are making to the mayor's proposed. What I'll walk through are the technical changes that we have that we need to make. We do these every year. Many of them are cleanups or updates to revenue projections, rolling forward grants. So this is really the technical side of things and doesn't reflect any sort of policy changes or things like that yet. It's just the technical side of things to clean up as we go from the mayor's proposed to the council adopted. So it's a pretty dense document. I'll do my best to kind of split the difference between really reading every single line to you all, but leaving enough time for questions or kind of pausing and making sure that things are clear on each of the lines as we go through. So I'll start with, and I guess I'll one more note on like the structure of how this document works. I've got all of the attachments here to walk through. These will actually be separate attachments to various resolutions that will be coming before you next week for budget adoption. So they're all here now for tracking purposes, but these will each become individual attachments for the various budget resolutions that you'll hear both as the city council and as the HRA board and as the library board. So the first set of changes are technical changes for updates or omissions to the mayor's budget. The first line we include in all is just authority to get accounts and accounting units organized. This is a super technical part of what we do, but just to make sure those are all aligned correctly of any errors that we may have found in account codes. The emergency management has siren maintenance costs that aren't accounted for in the budget, and so this adds an amount of $15,000 of authority to their budget to make sure that siren maintenance is fully covered. Line 16 and line 25 are both the same. These are technical adjustments that we need to make every year for VEBA and PHP contributions, and this is an OFS item that we just missed in our initial budget build, and so we needed to get these both entered in correctly. Line 18, oh, excuse me, I have a line counting error, I'll fix that. So the HERO and HR were shifting $30,000 from the HERO budget to the HR budget, the $30,000 of equity funding. So a net neutral change, just adjusting where that's budgeted. You heard from the Human Resources Director about training and materials and some repurposing for training work. And so these are budget neutral items, but we just need the authority to make that change relative to the mayor's proposed budget. Lines 21 and 22 reference transfers for Riverprint employees. So there's a corresponding change in the special fund section, but this is to close out the Riverprint activities as our actual print shop, but making sure we've got funding for the employees that will remain city employees after the actual print shop is closed and that work is shifted out of the city. We have an updated cost for elections. Ramsey County's sent us a new contract and estimate for our election costs with them. This reflects the total potential cost in 2021 for that updated contract. I know those negotiations are ongoing, and so, but setting aside at least the amount that's been initially identified from the county, which can continue to be adjusted in 2021, but wanting to make sure that we have that amount set in the general fund. And then line 24 is again a very technical, we need the authority to update benefit offset accounts in our in the budget system in order to just, it's how we account for and pay for the benefits, but no budget change. I'll pause there for a minute and before I jump into the revenue side of the general fund.
Sorry, I see Ms. Prince has a question.
Yeah, the line item, let's see, it's 19. Repurposing training and materials to cover employee expenses for deputy director and management assistant. Mm-hmm. It says budget neutral, but that position is being added at 181,000. So I'm assuming that you're not referring to that.
Council President Brenmoen, Councilmember Prince, right, this line, it is referring to that deputy director, but it is, this line is a change relative to the mayor's proposed budget. So the mayor's proposed has that position included. This, as Director Newborn talked about, is changing, moving some additional funds from training and materials to the employee expenses to pay for an incremental additional cost of where that position is likely to be hired in 2021, both for the deputy director and the management assistant. So it's not a full add, but the reason it's budget neutral is because we're reducing the training side and then increasing the employee expenses to cover those two margins on what the cost will be for those positions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there other questions before we move on? It does not look like there are other questions at this time.
Thank you. The revenue section for the general fund, we've got a couple updates to revenue projections. Business license revenue is projected to be better than what we had originally included in the mayor's proposed budget. Same with Xcel Energy revenues. Those franchise fees have been performing at a higher level than we had originally anticipated in for the 2021 budget. So we've included those two increases here relative to what was included for the mayor's proposed. Cable communication, this is the cable franchise fees. Those have underperformed and continue to underperform. So we're adjusting those downward. Same with parking meter projections. In particular, I think looking ahead to 2021 on the parking meter revenue and seeing where, trying to read the tea leaves around COVID and what's going to happen in the early parts of 2021. Thought it was prudent to write down these revenues a bit further, knowing that the activity that usually drives parking meters is likely to continue to be reduced in 2021. And then the last line item, or line 41, is a correction to special service, Amanda, and office, MS Office revenues. And so this is another technical fix. The actual revenues that will come into OTC from special funds and other entities for the services that they provide was just incorrect in the mayor's proposed budget. So adjusting that downward by that amount. And so where we land in the end is that we're balanced again in the mayor's what the mayor's has for his technical changes. Balance out all of the spending changes here, and then the revenue changes here get us back to a balanced budget. And then this last section, which is obviously blank for right now, is where we'll populate the policy and program changes that you all will be adopting. So I'll pause again. That's the summary of where the general fund technical changes are.
Great. And just a reminder to folks that this is our every December before we get to truth and taxation and our final budget, we have this budget correction. This year, we also did this a little earlier in the year because we had so many due to COVID. So this is the second time we're doing a budget adjustment. Well, I guess as we're going into 2021, like as these changes are as more information is available and as we clarify things. And I appreciate this walkthrough and also the to be continued section of council changes and the proposed budget. And as we're going to hear from Holly, we are continuing to work on that piece, making sure that we have the proper flavor of money behind each of the priorities that we have proposed. So our job really today and going into the next week is to populate the rest of this spreadsheet. Are there other questions for Ms. Earl on this document? Okay, it looks like we do not have questions.
Great. So I'll try and move quickly through the rest of it. That summarizes the general fund side. We do have sections for the other parts of the budget. I don't think I'll need to go line by line. These, I think I can talk about these in a little more of a groupings because they all tend to be a similar flavor. So this section now is the special fund section of the changes. Here, I'll just say many of these are technical changes to update, like align transfers to make sure they're both on the right side of correct on both sides of a transaction. To carry forward unspent funds for certain projects that are in special funds and where that's allowable. I'll highlight lines 92 and 93 are the technical changes, again, related to Riverprint on the special fund side. So this zeroes out sort of the current operations for the print shop and then recognizes the transfer from the general fund to cover the Riverprint employees that will remain in the city under the new plan. I'll highlight, I want to make sure I get the line number right. Line 87 is the carrying forward unspent balances for the Citywide Tech and Innovation Fund. And then there are some other HR changes that also flow from Director Newborn's presentation. They're here under OFS since they're related to the Chief Equity Officer, which is budgeted in the general fund, or excuse me, in the OFS special fund. But so that line is there as well that came out of the details were shared during her proposal presentation to you all a few weeks ago. I'll pause and maybe just see, I'll also just note on the newer amended grants, same thing, I won't run through all of these. I'll try and get them all on the screen at once. These are all carry forwards. And so we update our grant budgets or recognize unspent funds. And so we need to adjust those annually. These are all multi-year funds. And so it doesn't change like a total grant amount or anything like that. It doesn't change the requirement that folks come to you all to apply for and accept grants. This is just getting the budget in the right in the right spot for grant budgeting.
Does not look like we have questions.
Great. So moving ahead, they get smaller and smaller, I think, as we go. So they'll be able to move quickly. The debt fund, really small set of changes, just updating debt service to match final results from a recent sale. And then this is a budget neutral change to just align actual coding in the system with the correct property tax levy. Doesn't change the levy. There's no issue or change with that. This is simply making sure that the system reflects things in the right spot, and just making sure that we just need to get that corrected. So those are the changes for the city debt fund. Moving into CIB, the one change is a carry forward from a bonding authority for the St. Paul Streets program, and this was discussed as part of the discussion of the 5-year plan with Public Works of having that additional authority to roll into 2021. The other change that I'll pause on for a moment, CIB community projects. So this section is new. We've done our new process. This is the first time we've done our community process with CIB. We've got, these are the projects that were approved and to be funded out of the $1 million that was set aside. It's $500 each year in every capital, in the capital budget process. And so we wanted these in front of you all, felt like wanted to be transparent about what the projects are as we're adopting the budget. In order to get these in the right spot in the accounting system and the way that the projects are set up and the account coding actually works, we'll also need to do an administrative order in the beginning of 2021. So these are not, these are non-ad, so they're down below sort of the rest of the CIB section, but wanted to make sure these were included in the documentation regarding the 2021 adopted budget. So this is probably the biggest change to how this technical tracker is working, but so just wanted to pause there for a moment. Great. Moving on to the library agency. The only changes we have here are carry forwards. Adding a grant that I know Director Pankert has discussed with council, the IMLS grant, and then carry forward estimates for unspent grant funds. So similar to the city side, same thing, we identify funds that are available to roll forward and make sure they have them in their budget for 2021. Moving to water, there's no changes for the regional water board, or excuse me, the regional water services for 2021. So their budget is unchanged from what was originally proposed. The River Center has just one change. Their COVID response fund. So this is a carry forward of the amount that was allocated in 2020. For COVID response, they ended up not spending all of it, or they don't anticipate to spend all of that into 2020. So this allows carry forward of that authority and access to those funds in 2021 for the River Center. But I made sure to include the note. This doesn't change the total allocation. It's just a carry forward. So the 1.9 that was originally approved, proposed by the mayor and approved by you all, doesn't change that amount. It's just giving them access to those funds into 2021.
Ms. Earl, can you explain that just a little further? Because my understanding here this morning is that we used what is formerly referred to as our CVZ funds to fill the gap here with the River Center. So if they have carry forward funds, maybe they don't need so much of our CVZ dollars.
Sure, Council President Brendmoen. So this is separate from the STAR funding that's included for economic development and PAYGO for the River Center. This is, I think, what we've heard from the River Center is that the impacts are going to continue into 2021, and that we're continuing to see funding needs to support convention centers and the kind of work that they do, because we're just not expecting that those activities, that the revenues that come along with large gatherings are going to be able to come back, even in the same way that we had maybe hoped when we originally allocated funds to them and when we were originally working through the budget. they're also, they do depend on parking revenue for their operations. And we also know that that's taking a significant hit downtown, and overall folks just aren't going to work, aren't contracting to park. And so, so this, like I said, doesn't add to their overall the allocation across the 2 years, both between the general fund and the allocation out of STAR. It's really just when, allowing them extended access to those dollars. I don't know if that answers your questions or if there's more I could offer or follow up on that.
We'll have follow-up questions.
Okay.
I honestly, I probably shouldn't say this, but I never understand the River Center's funding. So I appreciate the quick explanation, and we'll follow up offline.
Okay, great. And then the last, I think we're on to the last, is HRA. Yep. So the final set of adjustments is HRA. The first line, line 12, is reducing the business assistance budget. And this is really just for the other side of an action that you all took earlier this year to really kind of move that funding forward into 2020. We're finalizing the numbers on the parking fund just to make sure that we've got the right information here. So what actually will be attached to the HRA resolution will obviously have numbers here, but this is just to recognize the impacts of decreased parking revenues and how that's going to be adjusted for in the 2021 budget within the parking system. And then the rest are carryover or just other technical changes to align their budget with what they need and where they're headed with funds that are available in 2021. And so I'm happy to take other questions, or if I went too quickly over a particular section, or folks have questions on any of the line items. But those are the technical adjustments that we've got ready for the 20. So to be clear, this is amending the 2021 mayor's proposed budget. We will have another resolution coming to make final adjustments to the 2020 budget as well. But just want to make sure we're clear that it's hard to keep track of all the technical changes across the 2 years, but this is what will be coming forward as part of the budget adoption for 2021.
Thank you. And thanks for that clarification, Ms. Earl. I misspoke at the beginning of the meeting. So these are budget adjustments for the 2021 budget, and we will still be seeing the 2020 final changes. Yep. Sorry about that. And thanks for the clarification. Other questions? Okay. It looks like you've done your job. Of course, I have a little bit of follow-up for you, but does not look like there are outstanding questions from the council at this time. So thank you so much for this presentation.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, Holly, it is your show.
Thank you, Council President Brandmoen. Council members, let me pull up my screen. Good morning. So it is our final budget committee meeting of 2020 for the 2021 budget. I am here today just to review the budget process real briefly and talk about how this year is slightly different than previous years, and then get into the council budget phase and what priorities the council is looking to adjust in the proposed 2021 budget. You're all familiar with this slide. This is just the St. Paul City Council budget process. And as you know, the budget process is really a year-long event, and it begins early in January as the council identifies policy topics and digs in and identifies budget priorities prior to the mayor proposing his budget. As I mentioned, this year with the pandemic in March and the civil unrest in June, early on, the Mayor, Office of Financial Services, and City Council identified that there could be significant budget impacts given those events. And so it was determined that revenues may be lower than expected, and there will be additional expenses that were not anticipated. And so as Council President Brandmoen mentioned, this year, unlike other years, in October, the Office of Financial Services came before the council with a budget adjustment. And so I just thought it was good to recap what that 2020 mid-year adjustment had in it, because that really carried forward into our 2021 budget conversations as well. And so just, I won't read through all the items, but as I mentioned, we had revenue shortfalls. We had some department budget reductions to close that gap created by the revenue shortfalls. And we had some one-time investments where it was needed most. We also received CARES Act funding and were able to deploy all of that money into the community. Just to recap, the mayor's proposed budget. Early on, as I mentioned, the city council prioritizes their budget items and shares that with the mayor's office. And one of those priorities was to keep property taxes low. And the mayor did propose in late August a 0-0-0 budget, meaning no property tax levy increases, no staff layoffs, and no use of emergency reserves. So as the city council went into their budget process, it was their priority to make sure that that 0% levy increase was maintained while delivering quality services that our community deserves. And so September through now, we have exhausted all the budget books, gone through every department, and not left a stone unturned. We've had a public hearing to hear responses from the public on the mayor's proposed budget September 3rd. We've had over 12 budget committee meetings that have been broadcast and also recorded, available for viewing. We introduced this year a budget survey, and we've had over 52 responses as of Monday. I will make sure if there's any more that those will be distributed to the council members. Our council budget email address has also gotten more emails this year than any other year, receiving over 135 emails. And then tonight, we will have our final budget and levy public hearing at 6 p.m. This is just a recap of what we've heard from the budget survey. It is wonderful that so many people have taken the time to review the budget and to share their opinions and voices on what is important to them. This is their city, and we've heard support for community first public safety, city services like parks and recreation and libraries. Many comments that they like that the city is being responsible in controlling costs with that 0% levy increase, and also affordable housing and homelessness is a top priority. As I mentioned, the city council identified priorities early on in the budget year, and they're listed there. You can see that many of those align with the same things that we've been hearing from the budget survey and emails. And so as the city council has reviewed the budget in depth, there were a few things that were very important that they're looking to make adjustments to the proposed budget. And so those items, as Council President Brenmo mentioned, we're still in the process of finalizing. And this is a high-level overview that there's support to restore library collections, library hours, parks and recreation programming, invest in the tenant protections ordinance, and restore mill and overlay. And then this is just, if you look back to the council priorities early on identified, you can see here that all of those priorities are invested in the 2020 budget that will hopefully be adopted next week. And so next week, as I mentioned, the city council will be voting on adopting the budget at the 3:30 city council meeting. And so the rest of information I have is really resources. This is more for the public so they can review the budget process video and then different resources. So I can stop for questions or go back to any
Great.
slide we need.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. And I appreciate too, just recognizing that with the online nature of these presentations, we're having actually a lot more participation, which is fantastic. But also to have this information embedded in Legistar and something that we can attach to our own newsletters and social media helps create that transparency that we all strive for in our budget process. And kind of walk through where we've had that engagement, because we know we've really tried to make a shift from people feeling like their opportunity to engage in the budget is during the truth and taxation hearing, which simply is far too long and are far too deep into the process to be the best time to influence the outcome. And instead, to continue to check in with community members along the way. And I really appreciate your presentation here today, showing so much alignment between what we've identified as priorities, what the community has identified as priorities, and where we are landing here as we walk into our final vote next week. So thank you for that, Ms. Houston. Are there other questions or slides we'd like to go back to, colleagues? We may have hit that budget fatigue zone. Ms. Naker.
Thank you, Council President. No slides to go back to necessarily, but just wanted to thank Holly for the presentation and thank all of the people who have been participating in this process. It's amazing to see those numbers of folks. I sometimes feel like the budget process is hard for people to understand and to engage in, and I know we as a council have been doing our best to make it more accessible. But it is really the most important thing we do. And to see so many people taking time in this incredibly difficult year to give us their feedback, and as you said, Council President, to see the alignment between those values and the values we set out at the beginning of this process is pretty extraordinary. And I just want to reiterate that for me, the priorities in this budget cycle, as we talked about earlier, are to, and what I've been hearing from constituents aligns with this, is to just really continue to provide the basic public services that are the linchpin of our community. So parks and recreation centers, our libraries, those are the places that people are desperate to get back to as soon as they possibly can. And so this is not the year to cut those services in any way. I'm excited to be funding them to a level where as soon as we can fully reopen, we will be able to. And I also am glad that we're not holding ourselves hostage in this really difficult year to the constraints that we're seeing and not funding infrastructure that we know we need to invest in. So we've talked a lot this year about mill and overlay and street maintenance and how we are so far behind in that work that we can't take our foot off the gas. So it's really great to see that we're talking about continuing to invest in street maintenance work that we just can't get behind on. And then I finally just want to say the other thing that I've been hearing a lot from folks is about public safety. And the fact that folks are concerned. There's a lot of different feelings from all of my constituents that I've been hearing from in terms of what public safety means to them. But across the board, I'm hearing people want us to communicate what that means to us. And so I'm looking forward to, when we adopt our budget, also talking about public safety and how that is incorporated in this budget. And I know we're talking about how to do that, but I just wanted to mention it.
Thank you. Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. Thanks for all of the work that has gone into this. I know that it's been hundreds and hundreds of hours, and we're facing very, very challenging choice paradigms. And I do feel heartened to see a lot in the council counter proposal that I personally care about, preserving our community first public safety investments, tenant protection support. There's a lot that needs to be acted on that our community has said is important to them. And I do really feel disappointed at the same time that our counter proposal largely does not respond to what I increasingly see as numerous calls with hundreds of comments, hundreds of emails, and more testimony I'm sure we'll hear tonight about divesting resource from the police department into core areas of need in our community. I think that's the work we actually have to take on as a city because we uniquely control that budget. There's a lot of needs in the pandemic. There are state and federal and county resources that we're constantly trying to get access to, but we do have that within our power to address. And I just don't feel like I can let this presentation pass without marking that because it is a glaring omission to me. And I think we'll hear more about that tonight. So I I want to make sure that we acknowledge that because it's sitting very heavily with me and something I feel very strongly about.
Thank you, Ms. Jalali. Thank you. Are there other comments on where we're at in the process here? And again, we do have a week left, and some sources are still being, identified. And I think that what we've tried to do is find those resources without cutting things further on other, without further cuts. So that is the challenge. And we have identified some things I think that are very creative and some things that we are pushing on. And hopefully we will have those details nailed down here, but it feels like we're very close. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to vote on this. And I also just reinforcing what Ms. Jalali is saying about the work that's in front of us and recognizing that this is an extraordinary year. And this budget is something I've never experienced before. That doesn't take away from the fact that we will be getting, the Community First Public Safety Commission study back to us next year. We will be getting, potentially information from our audit committee and things that we can synthesize and work with to create a budget that for 2022 that is maybe more bold and attack some of the challenges that Ms. Jalali outlined. And I appreciate that we've all kind of worked together to get to this place and with our eyes kind of on the future. So thank you for those comments. And I do agree. Ms. Prince.
Yeah, thanks to everybody for the hard work on this budget. And to the points that have been made, I am so relieved that we are going to be restoring parks and library hours, because when I came into office in 2016, we had been through a recession period where we not only reduced hours, but we closed rec centers. And what we saw from that was that the very things that we're trying to address with community and first public safety were impacted by the fact that young people in areas of concentrated poverty did not have access to those parks and library hours. So I am really relieved about that. I want to say that one of the things that I regret that we have not figured out how to put in the budget, and I know that that a number of us agree on this in principle, is the ability to have a police academy with the Law Enforcement Career Path Academy students who have come up through our police department as AmeriCorps volunteers doing community engagement work while they earned their law enforcement associate's degree. And they have been trained very specifically in community first public safety. They know our neighborhoods, they know the people, they know the issues, and they have volunteered extensively. So I appreciate that there is some interest in trying to figure out how we might be able to do something going forward if it's not in this budget. But I also want to state very strongly my feeling that we are blessed with a police department that is extremely innovative, extremely responsive, a leadership team in our police department that understands this community down to every street, neighborhood, park, and playground. So I just want to say that when we look at the problems that are happening across the river, I think we are blessed with really strong leadership over here in public safety. And I'm really pleased about the work that we're doing to be able to increase our community first public safety efforts, as well as the study that we're going to be doing on 911. But I can't let this moment pass without saying how strongly I feel that we are blessed with an extraordinary police department that I, for one, and I know we don't take it for granted.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. Mr. Tolbert.
I didn't have my hand up.
Oh, all right. Sorry. Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Holly, for your presentation. I think overall, I think this is a solid budget, given the situation we're in, and it's we've been repeating this a lot. It may sound like a cliche, but it's the reality that we live in. We've had to make some really tough budget cut. So this whole process I think we have learned a lot about ourselves, the resiliency of the city, the resiliency of the council, the mayor's administration, and the people of St. Paul are very resilient. And this budget showed that. And so we had to tighten our belt. We had to make ends meet. We had to pull resources together so that those that among us that have the least can put food on the table and have a roof over their head, working with the unsheltered. Like, we're doing everything we can as what Americans should be doing, which is taking care of each other during these very difficult times. And we may not be at war with another country, but we are at war with a pandemic that strikes without boundary, doesn't care what race you are, what gender you are, what part of the city you live. It's here to wreak havoc. And so we have come together as a city to really work together and put this budget together. With that said, I think that the police budget is practical. I think it's surgical. I think that it's a good start. I think that we're very courageous in that we have shifted some resource into the community first, public safety, healing street. We can't just dismantle everything. We still have crime, we still have shooting, we still have burglary, we still have sexual assault, we still have human trafficking, we still need investigating. These things coexist with us, good and bad. And so I think the surgical approach that we have done this year is good, and we're gonna create baseline. We're gonna collect our data. We're gonna do a study, and then we're gonna continue to change. The city of St. Paul, the council is very progressive. We want to see change. We want to create better lives in St. Paul. We want people to do business in St. Paul, and so I think this budget reflects those values and reflect those openness and the excitement that will come after this pandemic leaves us. And so looking forward to more conversation tonight, but I'm very confident that we did everything we could given the resource that we have for this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Tao. I appreciate everything that you just said so much. And I do want to underscore, I've heard a few colleagues talking about crime and just the need to communicate about what we are doing now. What we're doing now, in addition to our investments in the short term, the long term, but what we're doing right now. And I'm the thing that just rises to the surface for me every day is just the number of guns on our streets and in the hands of young people and people who should not have guns. And I'm anxious to engage in a conversation about really taking that challenge head on and figuring out how we can reduce the number of guns that are out on our street, because people are resolving things that used to be fistfights with guns, and the repercussions of those decisions are life-altering across the board. And so I'm very concerned about the levels of guns in our city, across the country. I mean, it's an American problem, but I want to address it here in our metro area and work with our surrounding communities to make a dent in that, the impact of the proliferation of guns in our community, and particularly in the hands of young people whose frontal lobes are not developed and should not be handling weapons like that. So just underscoring some of those concerns as well. Are there other comments? And of course, we will be passing our budget, or we will be voting on our budget next week. I think that we're getting to a place where I feel pretty comfortable saying passing, but we'll have to see, and have an opportunity to have comments on our final budget again at that time. We will tonight so two things tonight for the truth and taxation hearing. It'll just be a public hearing. The presentation we'll refer to as the one Holly gave this morning, so we won't go through the slide deck again. We are communicating with folks who are participating in the truth and taxation hearing, so they are aware of that resource if they want to watch it before they present. We will be calling them in live at the meeting, so it may be a little clunky, but I think we've practiced a bit, and so that should go okay. People will be allowed 2 minutes to share their perspective. We have at least 2 people who have signed up to use translation services with their testimony, and so in those cases, we'll time the speaker a little bit differently than we would if they didn't have a translator. So if there's concerns about that, we are taking that into account. And again, the interesting thing about some of these online meetings is that they create opportunities and access that didn't exist before. And I'm really interested to see going into the future how we can make our public hearings and community engagement more accessible by continuing to leverage this online resource that we've really developed over the past 9 months, because it does feel like our participation levels are up. Yes, so that is in front of us today. We have our meeting at 3:30. We will complete that meeting and adjourn and call back to a new meeting, Truth and Taxation, at 6 p.m. because it has to start at a time certain. So we'll have 2 meetings tonight. Hopefully they won't run into each other like a few weeks ago and be the Uber marathon. That was a little bit much. But yes, so if there are no other questions at this time, we will work. Ms. Houston she's in go time mode right now, and she will be working hard to communicate with all council members as changes and adjustments happen as we try to reach agreement on our priorities being represented in the budget. Things kind of change from hour to hour, but I think that she's done a good job of keeping folks in the loop, and I'm doing my best as well. And if stuff comes up, please share, and we will close in here in this final week. So with that, if there's nothing else to come before us today. Oh, actually, I do want to say something while we're all here together. On December 16th, we do have an org committee meeting, and the intention, at least one of the topics, will be a conversation about our ordinance process. And Ms. Naker, not to put you on the spot, but do you want to talk a moment about that conversation? Okay, Ms.
Sure,
Naker.
happy to. Thanks, Council President. Yeah, so we've been having some conversations, and we'll make sure to walk around this information to everyone before the 16th, but just about how to make our ordinance process work a little bit better. I think during COVID, we've taken the opportunity to see how we can innovate and make the process more transparent for the public, and also give council members more time to learn about the information that's being presented, and then to propose amendments to mark up what's being proposed. Right now, we kind of have a first reading and a second reading where we don't do very much, and then a lot happens on the third and fourth reading. And I think sometimes it's hard to know to get all of it done, frankly, in that time, and to propose amendments and really talk about them with constituents and that kind of thing. So the hope is to give us more time to do that, to give the public more time to weigh in, and to present information about what's being proposed early on in the process rather than later. So we'll walk those around, but that's kind of a summary of what we've been talking about.
And I think that because of COVID, we've had the opportunity to question, like, why do we do this? Is it something that's required in the charter? Is it required by the state statutes? Or is it something that we've decided to impose upon ourselves? And the answer is the latter in most cases, that these are things that we've developed and imposed on ourselves. And so in addition to creating that transparency and maybe a more thoughtful process where we have a public hearing a little bit earlier and a markup period, so that our final vote doesn't come the moment after a week after we have a public hearing, which always seems weird. We're also looking at opportunities to streamline the ordinance process in cases where there isn't a lot of controversy. For example, a rezoning, a rezoning that's non-controversial, some of the more basic, straightforward things that take a long time for people who are trying to develop housing or what have you. And so to both and one, to figure out the process to on controversial items, and then also to streamline the ones that are non-controversial. So I know Trudy and the council staff have worked on some proposals. Ms. Naker and I have worked on some proposals, and the idea is on the 16th to come together and look at this information as a council, discuss it as a council, and have a policy to roll out in 2021. That is a policy that will codify, but also we can change. I mean, up until recently, they told us we couldn't have meetings online. Well, guess what? We can. We're doing it. So if we find that some of our adjustments are not working, we'll just continue to adopt and change it. But just in the spirit of not getting locked into a process that no longer makes sense. So we, as Ms. Naker said, we'll walk around some of those ideas so people can have a chance to think about them. And then that will be topic of discussion for the 16th of December during our org committee meeting time slot at 10 o'clock. So just a heads up on that. My last question is Mr. Tao. If you're willing, would you say the pledge today at the council meeting?
You know, I will, I could try.
Okay.
I bet Justice would help.
I always forget to ask until the last minute, so I'm asking right now. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank
To
you.
give me some time to practice, so thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be
Yes,
honored.
interpretive would be ideal. All right. All right. So wonderful. Looks like we're kind of going to start getting back into the role of the policy side of our work. So that's exciting as we wrap up the budget season. So thanks everyone for your hard work on this TNT tonight and our budget vote next week. Nothing else to come before us. We're adjourned.